Good morning. This is the second half of the session for Tenant Natural Resources and Energy. Today is Thursday, March 14th, and we're returning to Bill S-253, an act relating to building energy codes. And we're joined this morning with Mr. Grocher, Director of the Fire Safety Division from the Public Service Department. So if you could join us at the table, thank you so much for coming in, making some time for us. We've had the report that you helped write as part of that team this summer and fall. Richard Fahey gave us a guided tour of the report. We looked at the recommendations in the report. We talked about some of the things that will be familiar, for instance, improvements to the builder registry with the Secretary of State. And now we want to turn our attention to there is a study group in there, and want to hear your thoughts on a little bit on how we might appropriately study how division, well, one, if you could finish one sentence before I start the next, how we would look at fire safety as a potential home of the designated, sorry, not the designated agency, the agency having jurisdiction, the AHJ in the bill. But I think for the committee, since you've been in for a while, if you could remind us of the kinds of things you already do in the building community.
Sure. So for the record, I'm Michael DeRosa, the Executive Director for the Division of Fire Safety in the Department of Public Safety. I've been with the division now 40 years. We have extensive experience in the so-called, I call it code management versus code enforcement, because it really is a business management system. So what we do now is we issue public building permits for all buildings defined as a public building under 20 VSA. We do have 11 municipal inspection agreements. Those inspection agreements are posted on our webpage, and they vary immensely. We tailor them to what the community has the capacity to do. So some of them involve permitting, electrical, plumbing, like the city of Burlington, for example, or maybe Fairfax. All they do is existing buildings, so they vary depending on the community.
Sorry to interrupt already. Can you remind the committee of when you say all public buildings? It's easy enough to picture commercial, but how does that play out in the world of housing?
Right. So our jurisdiction includes any rental property, 1 and 2 family dwellings, multi-family residential, all the way up through all the commercial entities. And basically the only exceptions are single family owner occupied dwellings and farms on the ag exemptions.
Thank you.
And so right now I have the electrical licensing board, we have the plumbing licensing board, the handicap access board, the elevator safety board, and the fire service training council is under the Division of Fire as well. So we license plumbers, electricians, and then we have approximately 8 to 10 other trade professions that we register hyphen certify. So for example, we certify gas technicians, we certify oil heat technicians, emergency generator installers, sprinkler system installers, designers, fire alarm system installers. So there's a number of trade professions that we certify and register now, strictly within the confines of the Division of Fire Safety. We manage the continuing education for those particular trade professions. And part or a majority of those trade professions now have to take the energy efficiency module in order to obtain their initial license and or renewals.
Or what profession? Sorry.
No, don't hold me to this, but I think it's electrical, plumbing, oil and gas. Those four trade professions, in order to obtain a license, you have to show that you completed the energy efficiency. Training module that was passed 7 years ago. Most of those certifications are actually driven by national certifications, right? So for example, the propane folks, they take what we call the Certified Employees Training Program, or CTEP. That is a propane sponsored training program, and we sanction that program and approve the continuing ed that's being instructed to the gas technicians. Same with chimney sweeps and oil technicians, they use NORA as a national certification. And then we contract out with ProV, PROV. They do the testing of the electricians and the plumbers.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last name. Who was it?
It's ProV, I don't know, it's PROV is what the company name is. So we contract out with them, they provide the test bank. Our boards approve the test bank questions and work with the testing organization.
Do folks do that online? Or is it online and practical?
They take the test online. And before they take the test online, there's a procedure in our licensing rules where they have to prove that they completed so many thousands of hours of on-the-job training, and the whole tier of licensing comes into play there too. It's all in 26 BSA for plumbing and electrical.
Does Vermont have formal apprenticeship programs, or is it less?
Yes, for electrical and plumbing, they certainly do. Yeah.
It's one of the questions that came up for the registry, was if builders want to start to distinguish themselves in additional training like energy efficiency expertise. How would you pick what certification? People said that Lauren, the two Laurens were here, were saying that if you're willing to pay for something, there's probably an association out there that will tell you can be certified as X, Y, or Z, and of course we're interested in trying to have a meaningful certification that has real validity to it. How do you pick what kind of certifications you should honor or include versus they don't measure up in some way?
That's a good question. My opinion would be that when we look at the reason our licensing programs are not over at OPR, it is because our inspectors actually mentor, train, and work side by side with the contractors out in the field, right? So they have that daily interaction with all these electricians, and they kind of get to know them and they work with them and mentor them. Not only that, but our electrical and plumbing inspectors have expertise in the field. So it's pretty easy for us when we have that expertise to be able to manage this. The struggle I've had on the energy efficiency side is we just have zero experience in that environment. And so it's hard for me to vision that occurring with the current construct that
True.
that is there, and to be honest with you, S-253, not to get off your question, sir, would be, I support the, S-253 and getting this group together to answer a lot of these questions and a lot of the framework, because I feel, although we did meet over the summer and stuff, there was so much, in my opinion, there was so much information coming in from so many different people, and it was changing quite, as you know, frequently.
Yeah.
Um,
There was a pretty broad,
fluent and very broad, so I do support S-253 when it comes to assembling this group and maybe diving into the weeds to answer your questions thoroughly, but that is a challenge, is being not familiar with the energy efficiency side of the environment as compared to I can't go out and educate energy efficiency people. We have no capacity internally to do this.
are you aware if any other states have personnel like that, whether it's a division like yours or elsewhere?
Yeah, Vermont, well, I'm not speaking on behalf of the National Association of State Fire Marshals, although I'm the president of that association, so I do have a national perspective. What's unique in Vermont is our inspectors and our fire marshals act as building and officials and fire inspectors, right? So nationally, when you go to some of the big metropolitan areas, you're gonna see building officials where they go into great more detail into the construction than what we do. So we have to rely more heavily on our third party structural engineers, for example, Steve in our drawings. You'll go into some cities where they have structural engineers that are reviewing that structural engineer's work. They have licensed architects on staff that are reviewing the architectural drawings. So there's a big major distinction when you start going across the country, and when you look at the building, the whole building perfection, you're looking at, I'm going to New York City and take a look at those high-rise buildings. We're building pre-engineered 3-story buildings here in Vermont, right? They're already all pre-engineered, they come. It's just a totally different landscape than what you see across the country in our state, so. There's a lot of challenges here, I'm gonna go off here a little bit, there's a lot of talk about adopting the IRC, the International Residential Building Code. Well, in that code, you have the RVs requirements in that code. Well, if you've got an S-253, well, maybe you adopted on this cycle or not. Those codes align with each other depending on what year of the code you adopt. So you have to mesh those so that the CVs are in alignment with the IRC requirements. Otherwise, how is somebody going to apply those standards? So just saying a blank statement, adopt the IRC, it's not just adopt the IRC. There's residential sprinkler requirements in that standard. There's plans have to be submitted by a design professional. Who's going to be the design professional, right? Architects are exempt from stamping 1 and 2 family dwellings and multi-family units up to, I think, 3 or 4 units. So how do you define who a design professional is? And additional to that, we have great architects, but we also have a lot of architects that are not experienced in the public building realm either, where there's a lot of education that needs to take place at that level. Architects are not required to take a building code class to get their license. So I'm just telling you that we spend a considerable amount of time in our plan review process educating and working side by side with architects and mentoring them.
Sue Watson?
Thank you. I do have a few questions,
Sure.
but I also don't want to interrupt if you had more that you just,
I'm gonna,
okay. Well, so, looking at this document that you all were part of creating. So I just want to ask you specifically about some of the things that have your name associated with it, so to speak.
Right.
So looking at the B section, one of them says expand DFS's current database redesign to incorporate a statewide central publicly accessible repository for all Vermont buildings, including all residential that includes energy code data. So there's a lot in there. Wondering if you can just tell us about the database redesign that you are going through, and then how this, I see that you are like listed as a dissenter on that particular point. Totally respect that, but just tell me about your thoughts on either why you dissent or what your thinking was about.
so currently, we run a MySQL platform and it's a custom database that was built back in the late '70s, through the same vendor that we've worked with, since like maybe the early '80s. This platform is in need of an overhaul. We have funding for it. We have not selected a vendor yet, so this is like early stage. We do not have a vendor selected, but we're very close to selecting one. This system that we're currently procuring is built basically in modules. And so you have permitting, plan review, licensing. There may be an investigation module, but don't hold me to this. So there's a lot to it. And we are stretched to the max as far as the funding goes. In fact, that's been one of the holdups, selecting a vendor is because of the bids that have been coming in. And until there's some type of framework established for energy efficiency, I can't tell you what that would look like. I can only tell you that if there is a framework that is established and there's business flows, then we certainly have the capability or the IT technology, right, at the state level to address managing certificates or whatever it is. And I don't have that design criteria into this system for energy efficiency at this time.
So, and just to follow up on that, so is it reasonable to assume then that you're hopefully gonna be getting this new platform, it's modularly based, so do you anticipate it would be pretty easy in the future to add a module that could do this once you have the program established, and that's one question, and I have another question too, maybe I'll stop there before I get to the other question.
Right, I wouldn't say it would be easy because you first have to look at what is the problem you're trying to address with these certificates. And the problem that I've heard through the summer study was people just aren't posting them. And so regardless what you do to a database, it is the posting of these certificates, the way the current statute is. We do our best when we go out because we're obligated to look for these certificates, but there are some inherent issues with the way the process works because we have many buildings that use phased-in occupancy with us. So only a portion of the building might be done. And we issue occupancy to that section. If we held strictly to the intent of the law, we wouldn't be able to allow those people to open without an energy efficiency certificate. Meanwhile, 3/4 of the building is still under renovations. So that has some significant economic impacts in the design of that, so, what I'm getting at is there are certainly ways you can manage. The inflow of documents or certificates and that kind of stuff. The question is. From what I know here, are we solving the problem of the certificate being posted? I mean, that's what the issue is.
And then just to follow up, one further point, one of the things that you said was until there's a framework for energy efficiency, can you say more about that? Like, what do you mean?
Sure. I mean, I guess there's different ways of looking at the whole energy efficiency concept. I kind of look at it like, okay, so the problem is we have buildings out there that are non-compliant. And however that data is gathered and compiled, you have to have contractors, builders, and so forth that are trained and able to build energy efficiency code compliant structures. I mean, that's what the issue is that we need to, I support energy efficiency awareness. I guess what my position is, I like to build it from the bottom up and not stack it with a bunch of regulation and bureaucracy from the top down when we need to build the foundation first. That's what my take is, that's what my position has been. I think when you look at the way that you manage building compliance, not just energy efficiency, but across all the other parts of building infrastructure, you have to have people that are educated and trained to do that work. Because you can't be there all the time. Our guys aren't there and gals are not there to look at all the gas piping that is buried or connected, or all the gas fitting stuff, the leak testing, the pressure testing. So we rely heavily on our contractors, and we have good contractors. Our contractors do not want to go out and do poor work. I just think they need the tools to be able to go out and do this, and by default, you're going to have better built structures. I mean, that's just my belief, is you can start from the bottom and build this system up. And I also think, our building codes, because I had a housing study that ran in parallel with this, with the energy efficiency group, we have to be pretty mindful of the economic impact that this puts on the housing folks as well, right? I mean, some of our, we're trying to manage safety in all our buildings, and yet be mindful of the economic impact that we're having, and try to reach that balance where we can protect the public as we're charged to do, and do it economically in a feasible economic way at the same time. So when I review the IRC, or our team does with our stakeholders and so forth, we're gonna look at, well, what's the impact of this, right? I mean, are we gonna add $80,000 for every unit by doing this, or are we gonna delay our permit process for issuing permits? Right now, we try to get permits out. We're up in the 95% range within 30 days. And when we delay projects, we're costing people money. And so I'm very sensitive to the way we operate, to make sure we're issuing permits in a timely manner so people can start work. It's a sensitive issue, and we try to streamline the permits the best we can. So I keep that in the back of my mind too here, when you're taking another whole review element. It just needs, this stuff is what needs to be really, in my opinion, discussed.
Sorry, one more thing. So when you say just you prefer to start from the bottom up.
No.
You mean that you would prefer to, before we add this layer of energy efficiency, that you prefer to have like a building code?
No, what I'm saying is I think we need to look at who's out there doing the energy efficiency work right now and take a look at the existing system and see where we can improve this existing system right now and how we can get incentives out to the contractors, incentivize them to run, do good work and to learn how to build safe and energy efficiency structures. I think you start there and then I think the other stuff will follow it naturally.
Thank you.
Here's something.
Yeah, it feels a little like chicken and egg, and if you're gonna inspect for something. We have to have the knowledgeable inspectors who, I mean, but it is, if you're pointing out one of the sides of regulation that I think people don't necessarily appreciate. Which is that an inspector can also be a teacher. And it improves practice. I know that used to be true for the ad agency that did weed inspections. They would help people figure out, they would improve sanitary practices as well as even improve like their working.
And just, I'm sorry, sir.
Third point.
Yeah, your metaphor about building from the bottom up. First of all, I want to apologize. I was on my phone for a while while you were talking, which I find it very rude when someone does that to me. It was a really important call, and I was multitasking. I wasn't. The metaphor, but I want to tell you, I actually violated that rule in my own house. My house was originally a hunting camp on stilts. When I decided to add to it, I got under it and I put a foundation in. And there's a reason you start with the foundation, I understand. But that was the metaphor. Could you apply the metaphor to our permitting system? What is an example in our permitting system of starting from the bottom of?
Well, I think you gotta, first of all, you have to have the workforce, you have to have folks that are trained to do this. You have to have some type of I would encourage like some type of third party either review or certification, have the industry police itself. I mean, that's what we do with gas and oil, right? The industry, we work with the Vermont Fuel Dealers Association. And we have a great partnership. They industry has a great way of policing themselves. So I think that the energy efficiency profession has escalated dramatically in the past 5 years. I think there's a lot of room to bring in some of that knowledge into Vermont. And then as that's being done, I think we have some meaningful discussions on what is the construct of an energy efficiency program where you get the end results of an energy efficiency home that somebody's paying for, and it's being done right. I just, and then you have the, we don't regulate single family owner occupied homes. I'm going to oppose that along the entire way here about regulating single family owner occupied homes. That is a massive undertaking. And so again, and this model of building it from the ground up would be extremely beneficial in the single home market where you have whether OPR somehow registers a contractor that is somehow validated that they completed this national energy efficiency training or education program or whatever, so these folks that are out on the job site are doing it right. That there's no way we can't even police what we're doing now on commercial entity the way we should be. but it would be a disservice.
Sure.
Um,
How is your shop funded?
we are funded through, permit fees.
Is there no general fund appropriation?
No, no, just for the fire academy. I take that back. We do receive a little bit of general fund money, 300,000-400,000 to support our rental housing health and safety code program that we just took over effective January 1st. 2022.
Well, thank you very much. Any further committee questions for Director DeRocher?
I'm good.
Thank you again for coming in and helping us learn a little more. Mr. Musgrave, good morning. You're batting cleanup today. I don't know if you followed our conversation in the last couple days on 253. We were talking yesterday with OPR, looking at enhancing the registry. That seemed to be a thumbs up. And now we're talking about in part tuning the language for the study group in terms of setting a direction for things to be figured out by that group a little more definitively. But we're game for anything you want to share on 253.
Mr. Chair, that could be a scary request sometimes for me.
I was thinking it even as words left my mouth.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and committee for having me in, and thanks for working with my schedule. I am actually in California at the moment. It's now sunny for all of my testimony this morning. This is my fourth committee meeting. It was not sunny California because I'm 3 hours behind you here. So happy to say that I'm here on a good note. We're here. I'm taking a couple of days off, but we're also going to San Diego to collect a national award for a program that we put together last year that distributed over 12,000 Narcan kits, 8,000 self-care kits that included things like resource information, test strips for fentanyl. And I know that we absolutely, for sure, have saved 3 people in our industry. So we're winning a national award for this. So we're out here. I wanted to say that first because that's fairly non-controversial.
Congratulations for taking on something that's really not just straight up construction, for sure.
Well, workforce is paramount to us. And it's not just attracting the workers, it's making sure that they don't fall off the roof. And there's a lot of roofs, a lot of different ways that they can hurt themselves. So we care about our folks. So here we are today. I'm, for the record, Matt Musgrave with the Associated General Contractors of Vermont, and happy to be here today. Just I see that there's 6 minutes till 12 o'clock, and I'm respectful of the fact that you all probably want lunch. So I'm going to be relatively quick today because I don't have any opposition to this bill that you're likely going to vote on and pass today the way that it's written. I think that it's the next logical step moving forward in a process that we discussed during the Act 47 process that we went through. I think there's a lot of different great opinions. I think we're working through some of those opinions as different groups to try to come up with the right prescription for Vermont. I think this bill goes a long way towards that next step. I've been working very closely with a lot of not only OPR, but a lot of the other cohorts that exist out in the industry, trying to talk about what types of different certifications and trainings will help our construction professionals achieve these standards that we're looking to get to. And I think that's really a part of this process, and that's how OPR worked. I think I heard someone ask the question about, where do we come up with certifications? If you're over in the Government Ops Committee, you're having this conversation a lot more with OPR about how they operate with their professions. And really, this is an advisor model profession that you put together for the contractor registry. And what the advisor committee does, which has not met yet, and I'm a little concerned about that fact. And that's why I've become a lot more proactive working with Office of Professional Regulation. And I do have a builder member of mine that will likely be installed as another advisor. And that's really the certification system that the state falls under now generally is using a third party, as Mr. DeRocher said, that provides those industry specific trainings. What the advisor committees do is they are generally working with folks like us, AIA, VBRA, and such, to come up with what are those, what are the what define business or building science? What does that look like? What are the tenets of building science? At which point they advise the office, who then says, okay, anybody can create a training program as long as it has these key points, and that becomes a certification. And I think that was the dialogue that we had back in the passage of the registration, and that's something that we're working on hard right now. And also, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, so also at the same time, we're pursuing efforts with OPR, like to improve the application process for them so that builders are actually consciously noting that there is such thing as building energy standards. I'm working with them, and I think we would support language returning their ability to apply professional standards, which was specifically exempted in the H-157 bill, to get that passed. Because if you remember, we had a couple of small organizations, mine included, that supported that bill, but there were thousands of home builders across the state that contacted the General Assembly opposing that. And that was a matter of fact that had to be put in there, because then, and I would say today, Vermont doesn't have an appetite for licensing home builders at this time. There's not enough of them. What we hear quite frequently, and I hear this from members of the assembly, is why aren't there any contractors in my area? So this is the fact. So what happened back then was to put together this process to work with OPR. That was step one. I think step two is establishing whether or not how we should apply a building code. And I think, you know, Mike DeRocher just pointed out something that I had no idea about that would certainly impact the cost of housing. If all of a sudden, like currently in today's market, and I sold real estate for 20 years, I know this to be true as a subject matter expert, architects generally aren't involved in the single family process to begin with. So I didn't know that the IRC actually requires a stamp or another type of design profession. But these are all things dealing and talking about code that I believe we need a study committee for, so that we understand. I can bring in my cohorts from out of state who already participate with the building code study, and I think that's great. So we support S253. I'm going to be done by noon. I support S253 as it's written today. I am a little disheartened, though. I will tell you that before this bill even passes your committee, I'm seeing notes, communications on the other end that we're going to go over in the House, and we're going to stuff a bunch of stuff into that bill. If that happens, we will turn and oppose the bill. We're just not ready for that stuff. I think Mike DeRocher is correct when he says that the state's not prepared for it. If you actually, and this is, I think, a big conversation for the government operations committee to have, because they understand, and as well as a housing committee, that government ops committee understands what complications state government is dealing with at the moment. And right now, you have over 1,000 vacant positions in state government. Generally, you have about 8,000 people in your employ. You're down 1,000. You have 400 people, 400 positions advertised on the Vermont's job website, which means the state of Vermont has walked away from 600 positions. They've given up advertising those positions. And this is worse year over year from last year. Last year it was 800 positions. This year is 1,000 positions. So it's completely inappropriate to suggest that Mike's department has the capacity to do this at this time. It just doesn't exist. So we need to find some of these other methods to do so. Enforcing, and I understand the agendas, I get it, but forcing other things into this bill at this time isn't appropriate, because you have people over here working on what appropriate certifications there are. We stood up a system, and we told the builders back then, we stood up this system. This was to deal with the Arby's. It was to deal with fraud. And before that system has even been allowed to mature, the proponents of that system are back at the table asking you for more. And we're not going to be supportive of that at this time. Talking about building codes is good. Talking about licensing professionals at DFS is definitely off the table for us. Thank you.
Thank you. Would you be supportive of the study group figuring out how to implement Division of Fire Safety as the home of building codes and energy codes?
I would support the committee additionally looking at concrete ways that are feasible to improve compliance with the RBs. So I'm not willing to commit to the definite outcome of fire and safety. When fire and safety says to me, Matt, we can perform this task, my opinion will change, but I'm not comfortable, as I don't think anybody, most of the other people in the building are not going to be comfortable setting up a failed system and giving them this authority. If you give them the authority over single family housing, you now have to realize that you are assigning liability to that department as the authority having jurisdiction, and they're going to have to put something together, and potentially there could be lawsuits down the road as a result if they don't complete that mission, which you would statutorily put into place. So it's not just as easy. I mean, people are making it seem like it's really easy. Let's just have this conversation. It's absolutely not. And this is what you have other committees that talk about how government works. And I think this is a larger conversation. It's not an easy task. It's not, oh, this other state does it, so we're going to do it. It's complicated, and it's going to take time.
Yeah, sure. And I hope my question didn't seem to imply that it was an easy task.
No, but others have, and that I find disturbing.
Yes. Okay. All right, well, point taken, and thanks for your testimony today. Thanks for all your contributions to the working group this past summer and fall.
Well, thank you as always.
Our next step will be, there'll be some revisions to look at tomorrow that page, for instance, 8.4 through 8.6, the OPR changes we talked about, and write them into the bill so it's clear. They did say this is something they're interested in doing, but let's be explicit about it. And then the other piece was revisiting the study group language to see if we want to be more specific about things we want to learn more about. For instance, the agency having jurisdiction, or the piece of things, aiming, figuring out how we would get someplace, but definitely not assuming that we just name fire safety as the home and hand it off to them, but nothing like that. Okay, so with that.